Hello. Purchase your tracks today.
What's up, y'all? My name is Destin. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm a current grad student at the University of Minnesota.
What's up, everybody? I'm Isaiah Dennis, hail from St. Paul, Minnesota. Currently student at Luther Seminary and pastoral intern at Camper UMC and beloved UMC.
How you doing, everyone? My name is Vincent Knox. Currently, I work in education as an academic interventionist, and as well as a resident support worker in my other occupation.
Hey everyone, Demetrius from St. Paul, Minnesota. I serve as the Youth Development Outreach Pastor at New Covenant Church of God in Christ in South Minneapolis.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gail Smollett Jr., originally from North Minneapolis, currently living in Roseville, and currently I serve as the Coordinator of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion within the School of Public Health at the University of Minnesota.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Billy Siomvo from Burundi and currently living in Richfield, Minnesota. Graduate student at St. Cloud State University and working as a graduate assistant in the MedTech program at the same school.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's Keenan. My name is Keenan J. Friday. I'm 20 years old. I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota. I am a gifted multi-musician. Play for Darnell Davis and the Remnant, Hearst Family Experience. I have my own band right now, Plus Seven, that I started about a couple months ago. I am transferring to the U to study child psychology. I'm on my own now. I'm glad about that, and growing to be a better young man. I am starting the producing equities now, and as I grow my career as a musician.
I feel like a lot of folks mentioned like that they were taught things that they should or shouldn't do. But I'm curious, like, what were those things, like, explicitly? Like, what were you told that you should do or shouldn't do?
I would chime in right there for that is saying that as a guy, one of the things you always taught is to never lay your hands on a woman. That's one I always learned. And I wrestled with that as a kid. I was like, okay, I never lay my hands on a woman, but why do girls have a right to lay their hands on me and I can't do nothing but let them hit on me? I do not agree with that. Because that'd be so many problematic. I'm like, if I don't have to put my hands on a woman, tell them not to put their hands on me because I'm restraining myself as much as possible before I explode. So that'd be like one thing that I feel like, even like talk about toxic masculinity, I feel like that should be not one-sided. That should be something that should be discussed on both sides. But how do you have healthy conflict if you disagree without laying hands? And how do you verbally communicate with each other in different ways, shapes, and forms? So yeah.
On that subject, my mother did not raise me not to put my hands on women. She's always told me when I was younger, if a woman can put her hands on you, then you can hit her back, mind you, right? But society always told me different. So it was kind of this kind of like middle ground, like, what's gonna happen? And let's just say that as a kid, some things happened, right? And we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no. It's interesting because I've definitely, I know from my parents, I was taught the same thing that, Isaiah was. That's just something that, you don't do. I understand, like in certain situations, it might feel, it might feel hard to, to keep that restraint. But definitely, I was taught, that's something you don't do. You look for, any other, option other than to, kind of like retaliate in that manner. But thinking about something else, which just made me think about, was one of the things that I know my dad specifically, and even my mom at times, like really tried to get me to think about is when you're interacting with women, or even like as a kid with girls, like just think about the things that you do and say, and think about like, well, you have a mother, you know, you have sisters. Like, how would you feel, you know, if the same thing that you're doing happened to them? Like, how would that make you feel? And so I feel like in a lot of situations and a lot of times, like I always kind of have kept that in the back of my mind, and thinking about, well, you know, because you know, we all know if it's one of our own, we ready. You know what I'm saying? We not hesitating. You know, we ready to stand up and defend one of our own. So just, you know, that was one of the things I felt like really stuck with me.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that. You know, growing up, I had, like I said before, I had three sisters. So me growing up and, you know, learning how to treat a woman was always something that I already knew how to do until I got older and got out in the real world and figured out that a lot of women aren't like my sisters, or they're not like my mother, like the things I would do, you know, going on a date and being like, oh yeah, like I'll hold the door for you. And they like, why you holding the door for me? Like, that's weird. And it's like, what? I do this for my mom. But not only that, with what Vincent was saying as well, with, you know, knowing what you say to a girl. Because I remember growing up in school and I said the wrong thing to a young girl and she thought I was making sexual comments. And I remember it shook me because, you know, I got in trouble and then my mom asked me, you know, why would you say that to that person? I'm looking like at my mom, like, Mom, you gotta believe me. Like, I would never say this or do this or that. But, you know, always watching what, you know, a woman does or say, and even with the hitting, I remember I've been involved in a relationship where the girl used to hit me so much and I couldn't do anything about it because I was always taught not to hit women.
For me, one thing that I would say that I always remember that was like a no-no was, you are a man, you don't cry. Like in my household. And it was weird because I was the youngest, so I was probably the most picked up on. And it's like, you don't cry. You fall, you don't cry. And then I went to school, I went to boarding school, and it's like, you don't cry. You are a man, you know? So now you have another couple hundred other guys that you live with, and you all have the same idea of you have to be the toughest or you're going to get bullied or something. And then you move to the US where you're like 1,000 miles away, and you still have the idea of you don't cry, even if you're sad or, you know. So I think that's one of the things that is like, men don't cry. And it's like, I don't know. I still feel some type of way about it.
I didn't learn that at home, Billy. Like, I learned that in the world, right? Like, I don't know if it, like, my mother was not an emotional person. Like, I think that's clear to know. Like, we were not an emotional family, but my mother never told me I couldn't cry, right? Or never told me if I was crying that there was something wrong with it or anything like that. Like, that is something that the world kind of put onto me. And I to a certain extent, I accept it. And I think about that as well, right? It's like how much the world raises us. Right? Like, our parents do so much, right? They can only do so much, but we go out into the world, right? We listen to music, we watch TVs, we watch movies, we go to school, right? We're engaging with hundreds of people daily, to be honest, to a certain extent. And it's like, how much of our raising is put into that? Because I think sometimes we don't think about that, right? Especially if some of y'all have your own children or whatnot, like when we send out, or even your nieces and nephews or whoever else, when we send them out into the world, right? And think about the fact that, like, it's not just what we gave them, but it's also what they're receiving. Right? I think about that all the time.
I can piggyback off that. Man, there's many times where, like, just like Gail was saying, like, I didn't have a crying household. Like, even when I did cry, my mom would be like, why are you crying? Instead of, what's wrong? Are you, like, it would be like, why are you crying? And so I would, like, suck it up real quick. And just even like he said, your parents can only do so much, but the world does more. Like me getting in high school, people telling me crying is okay. And I'm looking like, yeah, nah, bro. Like, nah, I don't cry. And I remember literally the first time I would never, ever let somebody see me cry. The only person that has ever seen me cry in front of them is my grandma. Because, my grandma's, she's my lady, my mom is too, but my grandma's dear to me. But, she was the only, she was the only one that see me cry the most because she was always there, And I feel like the first time I ever cried was when, and this is on national TV. I played at the George Floyd funeral, and just being there, and I could feel like the sadness hit me as soon as I walk into North Central to the chapel room to like play. Like, no, I didn't care who was there. I didn't care who was watching. I didn't care. That was the first time I ever cried. Those 8 minutes and 46 seconds that we sat there for George Floyd was the first time people have ever in their life seen me cry. And after that, I remember, just like saying to myself, like, wow, I actually just cried. This is nuts. Like, I don't cry at all. I don't do that. But I feel like that was the first time. And I remember somebody coming to me and being like, it's okay to cry. I'm like, wow, like, that's nuts that somebody knew, like I was struggling with that, because there's times where I'm in a bad situation or there's things that happens that make me cry, even in the presence of God. I go to church, and even when I'm playing or when I feel the presence of God, I literally hold my tears. I would literally hold them like, nope, nobody's gonna see me crying. Nobody's about to. Now it's gotten to a point where, after that individual told me, like, the Lord told me to tell you it's okay to cry. Like, after hearing that is when, like, every time, even when I'm playing, like, tears literally fall down my eyes as, I feel, something, or when I'm upset, I'm able to cry, and in the household, I don't ever think I was able to cry, or, I've never been around my family. I've never seen my mom nor my dad cry ever, so I feel like that was the biggest time I ever, just let tears flow without me, sucking it up so fast and just moving, quick.
To piggyback off of everybody, it's funny, Gail. I was thinking about kind of your comment. I don't know, maybe our mamas might know each other because your mama sound like my mama. I mean, my mom was the type of mom to knock you out a cup of food and just leave you in aisle 5 and keep going. You got.
I told you not to touch nothing else.
you got the talk in the parking lot. Don't ask for nothing. I don't have no money. Don't touch nothing. Like, every time you went in the store. And so I'm with you. Like, I didn't grow up with a mom that was very emotional. There wasn't a lot of hugging, wasn't a lot of kissing. I just didn't grow up with that type of mom. I think she had tried to portray or do her best of being strong, right? She tried to be this very strong person, almost like kind of represent the male, part that I didn't have in the house. But I say all that to say, I feel, especially when growing up, when it came with my uncles, that they tried to really emphasize or kind of get into my mind that it wasn't okay to be emotional. Men don't get emotional. Men don't cry. Men don't have, if they have feelings, you don't let them show, right? You're supposed to internalize all your feelings. You're not supposed to cry. You're not supposed to be emotional about anything. And so I can remember growing up, like, my uncles were boxers. And so I can remember them teaching me how to box. And I didn't really like boxing. Like, I like watching it, but I didn't like boxing. And so I can remember, like, my other cousins really liking boxing. And so they got favorited over me because they were tough, because they would like to do this. But I was looked upon as someone who liked to read and didn't box. And that didn't equate to being a man, right? That wasn't that wasn't manly. You need to learn how to fight. You need to learn how to defend yourself. You need to learn. And so I can see some sentiments from everybody that it was almost like when I was growing up, like it wasn't okay to be emotional. You couldn't be emotional. You couldn't cry like Keenan was saying. You couldn't show your emotions. You had to be tough. You had to be strong. You had to look tough. You had to be hard. And if it was anything but that, it wasn't considered a man.
I would add to that, talking about, because like as guys, the more that they tell us to hold our emotions, they can also connect to how mental health. Think about all the stuff that we had to hold in and how it eats us up on the inside. And then later on in life, we raging out, we getting this all out. People think it might be this situation when this might be years of worth of pain that I've been holding on to. And I'm finally getting a chance to release this out. So it's really, we gotta get down to like, why is it like emotional? Because my grandma, she always like, boy, you don't get these emotions out. But trust me, I had the same kind of mama who was like, don't look at nothing, don't touch nothing. I will knock you out for you trying to buy nothing. Trust me, I got myself knocked out many times. But we really need to, it's mental health thing, because the more we hold our emotions, the more we eat ourselves out. And then the more are we going to be stone cold to even interacting with people, where to a point where it's like, how we, the question is going to be now is like, instead of like, how are we going to release our emotions? How are we actually going to get ourselves to be free? And the better question is, are we even truly being our real selves all the time we're holding these emotions? Are we actually being our true self? Are we actually revealing and being honest with ourselves with everything going on? Are we facing this situation head on, or are we just really bypassing it because we're touching the issue that's really deep? Like, yeah, all that. I'm done. I'll quiet.
But it's and Isaiah, you hit a good point, right? Because it's not just our own trauma that we've been holding in, right? It's generational trauma, right? Because it's like some of the things that have been passed down to us about what it means to be a man are things that have been carried through generations of our life, right? And so it's like, think about now we're in a spot where like finally in the world, people are starting to like pay attention to men and their emotions and their feelings, right? And so now that we are starting to kind of find outlets, it's like we're not just processing our own stuff, excuse my language, our own stuff, but we're also processing that of like our fathers, whether they were in our lives or not, right? Or our grandfathers, whether they were in our lives or not, right? Even our uncles, right? And all of that. And then we're also processing all of the trauma and experiences that all the women in our lives have had with men, right? Because that's something we also have to think about, is the fact that like they raise us based on their experiences, right? Not just based on their assumptions of what it means to be a man, right? And that's one thing that my mom always told me. It's like, I'm not raising you to be a man. I'm just raising you to be a good person, because I'm not a man, right? And she always recognized that. She's like, I'm not a man. I can't teach you to be a man, but it doesn't matter. And so she made sure, like, I have one sister, but it's 3 of us boys, and she treated us all the same way. She treated us all the same way. But there's one thing that she made us do that I hated: trash. Me taking out the trash. Women were not to touch the trash. And for some reason, my roommates, like I have 2 female roommates, and they will not touch the trash. They'll be like, no, we're not taking it out. I'm like, you're filling it up. I don't even touch the trash. And you want me to touch it? I was like, I don't see a clean kitchen. Right? If I'm a base an assumption, like if you're gonna do this stereotype that I gotta take out the trash, then sis, I need the whole kitchen clean at all times, right? Like it's just, that's always an interesting conversation to have with them also. But I don't really like taking out the trash at all no more. So it's over.
Gail, you're preaching now, okay? Go ahead and preach on, sir.
The weird part for me was my sisters were actually encouraged to cry. Like, no, and it wasn't just in my household, but like you will see that in my community, it's encouraged for a girl to cry. You gotta be a woman, you gotta cry, you gotta be vulnerable. But for a man, you gotta be the shoulder to cry on. And you're like, how much gotta take in?
Growing up, I used to cry all the time. I was an emotional child. I cried like every first day of school until I was probably like in 5th grade. Don't tell nobody my business though. I definitely used to cry. Not only that, I used to suck my thumb, actually. I didn't stop sucking my thumb until I was 14. Don't judge me. See, now y'all up in my business.
I'm not judging you. I'm just real glad that you're not bucktooth. Like, that's what I'm about.
Look, no, it was bad. I got braces in high school.
Which changed the game.
You got braces, you stop sucking your thumb, right? That's what the correlation.
But I find it so hard to cry now, because I feel like I was told so many times, like, stop crying. Like, why are you crying? You're crying about nothing. Stop crying. And I feel like every time that I do find myself crying, I feel like I'm crying for all the tears that I like haven't been able to cry. And I always feel like that's something interesting. There's another question that I want to throw out there. Do you all think that there is a difference between manhood and masculinity? Are they the same thing? If they're different, how so?
I feel like it's different because I feel like manhood, even though sometimes it was not the right thing to tell you, but it was in a way to encourage you to be this strong person, this man, this somebody that protects, somebody that is strong and all that. But masculinity, I feel like it was mostly, or it is mostly like your peers. It's just like a facade for the outside. I feel like masculinity has nothing to do with your personality. It has to do mostly about how you appear. Are you masculine? Do you seem tough? Do you tick all the boxes that goes with what a man is supposed to be? But manhood is like you coming from being a child to growing up to be this figure, I guess.
To piggyback off of Billy real quick, I find it interesting because I agree, and I think masculinity is really vested in one, the appearance, and I think two, it always equates with being aggressive. Like you like if you're not aggressive or so tough or so, you know what I mean? Like it's not, yeah. And I don't think that has anything to do with manhood. Those are just my sentiments. I'm still processing a lot, but I just want to add on. Good point, Billy.
But even like digging into what you're saying, like I sometimes think a lot about how if you're not exuding masculinity, then people say that you're not a man, right? Like they do go hand in hand, right? Like to be bluntly honest, there are some very feminine men who pay all the bills, who take care of their household, who do all those things. You know what I mean? But there's something that there's some people would be like they're not a man because they're not masculine, right? And I don't know if that's an individual thing or if that's a society put on pressure, but they definitely correlate. Unfortunately, they correlate. It's not for the good of manhood, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Gail. I think I do kind of agree with the explanation that masculinity is definitely shaped more in the kind of physical appearance, but I definitely think it feels kind of difficult to separate the two, and I just feel like part of that is like what Gail is saying is like that's just what we grew up on, like if you're not displaying what I think is masculinity, how can you fully call yourself being a man? You know what I'm saying? Like you said, you may still be doing all those things that people would consider a part of being a man, but if you don't look the part, then it's just like something's off, something's not right. You know what I'm saying? And people don't necessarily want to give you that credit, and I think that dives into kind of what Demetrius was hitting at, is like where masculinity, it has to be like this strength. And I feel like that puts us down into like, well, one of the things that I feel like we don't talk about enough, like toxic masculinity, and how that has been, put into our minds, like we talked about, you can't cry, you can't show emotion until it's anger. You know what I'm saying? Like all those things, I think we have to kind of unlearn to an extent to really try to kind of tap into, to see like what does it mean to be masculine? What does masculinity really look like? Is there a set description, that masculinity has to be this way? Or, can there be different ways in which it look? Those are some of the things that, just come to mind for me, like just thinking about, some of the things you guys are saying. So
I think you just touched like something that is really interesting. I feel like with manhood, it kind of is general worldwide, like globally, like an idea, even if it's not right. But I feel like masculinity then becomes like a spectrum from like one country or one space to another, you know? If you come from a certain area, certain things are not masculine enough, are not manly enough. Whereby like areas like somewhere in Europe, some stuff that they would do that are seen masculine, I definitely frown upon here in the US or in some African cultures.
I would echo what you said, Billy, about the spectrum because one thing is like I agree about masculinity and manhood can be interchangeable. I feel like for me, it's kind of like when you hear masculinity, with masculinity, I see that more as kind of like the way what the world's like how the world defines what a man means. Because when it comes to masculinity, we also gotta be real and talk about how the view of masculinity also comes from a white Eurocentric viewpoint. Because in America, you are fed, well, this is what white people think what a man is, and it's a spectrum. Because what a man means here to a white person, what a man means for a black person, like you got race playing a role, you got culture, you got history, you got a lot of stuff playing a role in masculinity. But for me, I see manhood as more like a personal journey of how you define it yourself. Because I feel like masculinity is what the world says, well, you're supposed to be a man, where manhood is how you personally define what it means to be a man for yourself. It's your own personal journey and how you discover more about who you are. And it's like, hey, what man means to me, not what it means to y'all, what it means to me. But it can be interchangeable because you learn stuff from society as well. But I feel like, yeah, that's kind of like a little bit where I'm at.
It's interesting you say that because I feel like it tends to be really hard for me to identify as being masculine just because I think like all the things that I've been taught what masculinity is, I haven't really identified with except for the fact of like appearance in a way. Like I don't like sports, never liked sports. Like I love to cook, love to clean. Like I feel like I've never had these quote unquote super masculine type of interest. Like I've always liked showing emotions. Like I've always just been into expressing myself in a certain type of way. And I think it becomes really hard for me to even say like I'm a masculine person. That sounds weird. Like I am a masculine person because like I don't know. I just feel like I've never fit into that box really well. But I'm curious though, it's something Isaiah was saying, like how as Black men, how do you think we define masculinity differently, like compared to how white men are defining masculine? Is there like some, go ahead, Gail.
We don't, right? Like our complete definition of masculinity is so rooted in whiteness that we don't even see it anymore. You know what I mean? Like the idea of what it means to be a Black man is so rooted in what it meant to be a Black male slave that people don't even understand that. You know what I mean? It's so convoluted and so covered up that we don't even know anymore. I don't even think we ever had our own definition of what it means to be a Black man, right? It's so tied up in whiteness and like white definitions. And it's not our fault. It's also not our fault, right? Which is why I applaud you for like having spaces like this for us to have these conversations, because it's like, it's time for us to start making our own meaning, like, and stop trying to like be what other people tell us we need to be or should be or have always been. That's how I really feel about it. It's like, it's never been ours to define.
I think I can piggyback off of Gail and what Destin was saying as well. Like I say again, growing up in high school, like, man, I don't even think like everything I did, like dressing, the way I dressed, it's crazy because it's like the girls wanted me to sag, you know, like, or people wanted to see sagging and I got my pants pulled up and somehow I'm gay because I have my pants up and not sagging, you know, like it was different things like that. I wanted to show emotion so bad. Like I remember used to telling my bros, like, I love you, man. They used to be like, bro, what? Like, you know, it was different things like that, you know, people see as, you know, not masculine. And I feel like once I really started to be who I wanted to be and not who my father or society was telling me to be, I feel like that's when people were saying, oh, he's not masculine. Because, you know, me always learning, like, I got to be tough, like Demetrius was saying, like being aggressive, being tough. Like I was always that until my senior year of high school when I start to realize things myself. You know, I remember me and Dustin, we were at Burger King. Destin, I don't know if you remember this, but we were at Burger King and I was talking to you about this, like right when I got out of high school. and we talked about, it's okay to be yourself. Like, who cares what people think? I was scared, like, look, if I start to be myself, that's when people are going to think, oh, he's not as tough. And I wanted people to realize or to know that I was tough, so I wouldn't be the outside or the black sheep. But it got to a point where, I was like, who cares of I don't care what nobody say. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to be who I am.
But something I think about is how much, I don't know, I'm just thinking about homophobia in all of this, and how I'm thinking of like the no homo movement, where like anytime you looked at some no homo, or anytime you shook somebody saying no homo, like, or I think of now people saying everything's sus. So I don't know, I'm thinking about how much homophobia shapes masculinity. It like almost feel like masculinity is like this, I don't know, I almost feel like sometimes it feels really rooted in homophobia. Any thoughts? Like I said, I'm not asking this question, right? But yeah, just wanted to bring that into the conversation.
To some extent, like sometimes I feel like they're the antithesis of each other, right? Because like I think even within the gay community, right, there is conversations around like, are you masculine enough, are you not, and what that means, right? Because it then gives that portrayal that you can pass for straight, right? And like why a person needs to pass for straight, right? And then that's rooted in like, harm and trauma and safety and security and all those things. And so it's like, I do think that they go together, and I also think that they are often opposing each other. But at the same time, I do think that, again, that's why it goes back to like manhood, right? Because like whether you're gay, straight, whatever, you're still a man, right? And so it's therefore, can you not exude manhood, regardless if that manhood shows up as masculine or feminine? Because to some extent, right, I could go far as to say my mother showed great manhood by maintaining our household on her own, right, with 4 children. But people would then say, well, no, she's just a strong Black woman. But then didn't you say strength is a trait of masculinity or of manhood? Like, help me understand, right? And I think they go together, and they also constantly are in argument and fighting.
That's a very valid point.
But the point you're saying is kind of like we gotta have these kind of discussions though, and just be honest, because at the end of the day, it's like either some people know the information, some people don't. Some people are gonna be ignorant, some people are gonna be accepting of it. We just gotta have these kind of fearless dialogues, which I have one of my classes talking about. Because even like when it comes to like the homophobia aspect, when it comes to homophobia, it can fall in many categories. Like one, someone might be homophobic because you're showing yourself, basically you being true to who you are, and they're unable to be true to who they are because they're scared of either the retaliation they're gonna get from their family, they're gonna get scared of the support system that they're gonna have. So there's like a lot of layers behind that homophobia that we can unpack as well about why some people are homophobic. But at the same time, the better question is, are we allowing people to actually be truly who they are? Because if we talk about masculinity, we can talk about manhood, we talk about blackness. The end of the question, I think the overall question is kind of like, will we allow people to actually be their true authentic selves? Because we don't, if we're not going to allow people to be their true authentic selves, then the better question to ask is, who are you? That sounds simple, but that's a lot to say, because that's basically what society wants you to be one way, but we're battling trying to be who we are, with society telling us we can't be this way, we got to fit their mold, we got to fit this kind of stereotype in order for us to get to where we want to go. So actually, how can we actually be men? How can we actually be in a space where we are, like what Gail said in here, how can we show that we create space that make people feel safe to be themselves? How can we? Are we allowing people to be themselves in the church?
Right. I don't necessarily identify as a Christian, right? I think I need to put that out there right away before I ask my question. But I also wonder, like, why would it not shift doctrine, right? Because I sometimes think about the fact that, like, we have received doctrine through a certain lens, and right, and to a certain extent, like, part of that doctrine is saying, like, God does not speak to gay people, or it used to also be God does not speak to women, right? And now we have women pastors, right? And I had to shift the doctrine. So it's like the doctrine does have to shift, right? If we continue to think that we're going to operate within the same rules, but we're going to shift how the rules are received, like that to me, there's a disconnect there, right? I think that, and I do agree with you that I do think that the religion, as most religions, as society currently is in this space of like major shift and change with the new generation that we're currently engaging with. But I also caution us in thinking that like rules, like basic foundations don't need to change. It's just what's happening within that foundation. It's like, no, like that's the same thing that we're experiencing within the United States. Like our government foundation is trash, right? It's racist. It's racist as hell. And we cannot operate with inside of it, right? Like we have to literally get rid of the Constitution, right? And start over. Not, oh, let's edit this and change this. It's like, that's the issue. Those are some of the issues, right? And if the goal is to be more inclusive around like what it means to be a man, and also what it means to be a man within the church, right? Like that's a very hard and real conversation, but it will have to go down to the doctrine, because the doctrine has been used as a tool to promote anti what am I trying to say? Has been used as a tool to promote like this homophobic agenda within the church for so long. Like the doctrine has been used that way, not one individual's interpretation of the doctrine, right? But the full thing.
Okay, y'all are saying a lot of good stuff. I want to take us back though to a question that Gail had earlier about, because I think we've done so much talking about like some of the issue, but I'm really curious of what you all's thoughts on are, how do we actually ensure and create spaces within the scope of our influence? So whether that's like, for some of us, that's the church. For some of us, that may be, for some of us, we work with students. Like, how do we create spaces, particularly where Black males feel safe to be them fullest self? And how do we help them become who they already are, rather than us helping them become what we think they should be? Like, how can we create opportunities for them to like walk into their own kind of calling, into who they are? I think that'll probably be our last question too.
I'll just say this really quick. As a youth pastor, one of the things that I found is I never judge or talk down or offer like my, disapproval, or, I've learned to listen very well and to love regardless in spite of, right? And I think that creating that space has helped a lot of the young men, specifically at my church, feel more comfortable, forthcoming, willing to share, and have some of those conversations, and know that you can have those conversations in confidence and in church, without having to wear a label or jeopardize who you are, or feel as if you don't fit in or you're a part of the majority. And so I really think it's rooted and grounded in love, because I may not see, something the way somebody else does, may not interpret, like Gail said, you start talking about doctrine, you just open up a plethora of conversations and get heated. That's what divides us on Sunday mornings, right? One person sees the scripture this way, another person sees the scripture this way, and now all of a sudden we're going to heaven and you're not. There's so much of that, right? And my whole thing is, I can still, be me and worship and believe the way I do, but I can still love you. I can still love you unconditionally, welcome you and appreciate you, and not treat you right or dog you out. And I just don't think that, specifically, and like I said, just from the perspective from the church, because that's where I spend a lot of my time doing this type of stuff, I don't feel like the Black church knows how to do that, which is really sad, right? It's like we're more focused on, like, again, that mind manipulation, that authority, and just, you do what I say, no questions asked. This is how it is. This is how it's always been, and so, yeah, I just think that there has to be, I think everything should be, really focused and centric about with love. And I think that's kind of the big thing that a lot of folks are missing. Like, I can have, and Destin knows this, like, I can have probably a lot of conversations that a lot of clergy in our organization would be super uncomfortable with, and I can still be all right, right? Like, I ain't gonna flip out or fall out of my chair, or and even if I do feel a different way about it, like I can still dialogue and have the conversation and learn from the experience. And I think that in itself is a skill that the Black church really, really, really lacks.
Yeah. I would say, echoing kind of what Demetrius was saying, for myself, first and foremost, I try to promote this idea of unconditional love, right? With anyone that I encounter, no matter who they are, right? Because like, even though I said I don't identify as a Christian, there are Christian values that I do like definitely connect with. And one of those is recognizing that they say God loves unconditionally. And so you should love like God. And so to me, it's like, if there's any moment when I meet a person, especially a man, a Black man, who for any reason I'm like, I can't love that person. Like, there's no reason, you know what I mean? And that's something, and then that takes me to my second point, like self work, right? Doing the internal work I need to do to be all right with whoever I'm encountering or engaging with because of their identities, right? Because like any judgment, any type of anything I feel, it's not about them, right? It's about me. And so many times we want to put our issues into the other person and be like, they need to change because there's something wrong with them. And no, it's always about us, right? Because God is never saying that, right? It's always about us. Like, we should receive them and take them how they come to us, because that's how God expects us to show up for him, right? Or wants us to show up for him. It's like, however you come, it's like, again, I'm not a Christian, so let's get off that. But like, that to me is how I work on creating these safe spaces. It's doing the internal work, loving unconditionally, but also exhibiting the same behaviors, right? So it's like, as long as, if I push myself to walk into spaces feeling more confident and safe, right? Recognizing that I do that because it sets an example for those who are coming either next to me or behind me, it makes it that much more powerful for me to feel that, to force my comfort into a space when I know like students are coming behind me.
One of the things that I was sitting here thinking about is, one, just really allowing yourself to kind of have that level of vulnerability where you can be real, and open up about kind of like your own experiences. One thing is like, huge, thank you to Keenan for being able to do that in this space with us, because I know he and I don't know each other at all. So, you know, for him to do that, that definitely is something that takes a lot of courage, you know? And I think when you can exhibit things like that and be that vulnerable, I think it can encourage people to kind of really start to have these types of dialogues. And, just thinking about that, as I've gotten older, me and my siblings have, even had not just related to this topic, but even other conversations with my father about things that, these are things that y'all kind of told us when we were younger. And now that we older, kind of forming our own opinions, it's like, wait, why did y'all have us do this? Why were y'all telling us this? Because now it don't really seem like that was necessarily, the best way of doing things, or the right way of doing things. But, he was pulling from his experience and what he knew. So I think, just kind of, I think that's where I've kind of gotten started, you know? And then also, working with youth, a lot of times, I hear, some of the things that they just kind of will just say off the cuff. And it's really not me really just kind of coming down hard on them, but just really just asking them questions like, okay, so like, why would you say that to another person? Where did that thought come from? Where did, really trying to get them to think about, the things that they're doing and they're saying, like, are these things that they truly believe, or these things that they just regurgitating because they hear on a daily basis? And so, I think being able to do that, and even if you just start in like small spaces, I think, it, if more people was willing to do that, I think, we could really move in the right direction.
I would echo what everybody says because to me, like my background, I was done like a lot of youth work and working with youth. I always say this is you can cuss me out, you can hit me all you want, but here's the things I'm not gonna stop doing. I'm not gonna stop caring about you. I ain't going anywhere, and I'm not gonna stop loving you. And why I say those three things is because a lot of times, particularly with youth, a lot of times youth are used to people walking in and out of their lives and just dipping out. And having someone who's been consistent in their life for a little bit of period of time, that means a lot. And being that person, because I'll share an example. one of my youth was actually right now he's serving time because he was with his friends and they accidentally shot someone. He was I was shocked when I heard about it because I was like, I know both of those youths. I knew them both, the one who got shot and died and the one who did the actual shooting. But the one thing is that in the midst of that, he was shocked that I was there behind him, like, yeah, I know what you did was wrong. But the one thing I'm proud of you about is that you stood up and you owned up to your actions. I'm proud of you on that. He was shocked and he was not expecting that because he expected me to like shoot down on him, making him be like complain stuff. But having someone who was there is like, well, you see him like, yeah, I see you take responsibility. I seen that you was able to push forward in the midst of it. Because trust me, I know it's hard. But yeah, I know now you got certain time. I understand that. But here's the thing. I'll make sure your family's okay. When you get out, trust me, I'm gonna be out there. And he thought that I really meant when I said like I don't give a care whatever you do. I'm still gonna love you no matter what. So just have that. I share that example because it's like they need people like that. Because a lot of times we want to be there at their ups. How many times are we there for people when they're down and they're low and they did something messed up? A lot of times people be escaping in the midst of that. But having someone who's there for you in the midst of the time when you are down and out, that means a lot. So I really feel like not only the unconditional love, but just being that presence and just being with the people through thick and thin. Like I know you always hear marriage vows and covenants when you said to like for better or for worse, the sickness and the health. We say that to our spouses, but sometimes we need to do that for each other. How are we gonna take care of each other in sickness and in health, and in better or for worse? Like how are we doing that with each other? So yeah.
So I was just gonna say I can't like emphasize enough what Gail said about work on yourself, you know. But to add on to that, do some research about things that you don't know. Ask questions, you know. That's the only way you can create a space for others. Because I don't know how to put it, but we tend as human to be, we assume that what we know is the truth sometimes, and we can't create a space for others to be vulnerable, to get to their like where they want to be, if we are not researching and get to know what is this, how do they understand things, what's their background, why are they thinking a certain way.
We talked about earlier, we mentioned a lot about like how a lot of these things about masculinity that are negative are stuff that we're learning from society. So we talked about media, music, movies, books. How would you all like to see Black men represented differently?
Can I first say it's not that I want them to be represented differently, because I don't. I want the full kind of, I want there to be more representation of what it means to be Black, right? Because just like what people see, like that is Blackness, right? That's humanness, right? I just need there to be more, because people take what's put out there as the end all be all. That's how all Black people are. And that impacts me, right? But I also think to say like, I don't want that to be seen, I just want this, that's equally harmful and just as racist.
Yeah, I agree with Gail. I think, you know, we've been typecasted, you know, and we need to be able to see more consistently that that's just not the case of, you know, who we are as Black men. When you look, you know, from a wider perspective.
Yep, definitely. I totally agree with that. I'm not about to say much, but I totally agree with what you're saying, Vincent, and